I mean, I think that the point is, I think I'm worried about university campuses in the United States and elsewhere because of political correctness. And the point is that when it comes to higher education and education in general, nothing should be sacred. Everything should be open to discussion and debate. That's the point of education. And when I used to say that one of the purposes of science, okay, is to confront our beliefs, okay, confront our misbeliefs, and in some sense is to not offend so much, but confront, okay, provoke. And when it comes to science, when it comes to social sciences, when it comes to history, if our campuses turn into bastions of political correctness, on the right or the left, where you do not want to hear from people you disagree with, then education ends. The purpose should be to hear the things, the ideas that you don't like, that you don't accept, and debate them, because that's what learning's all about. And so I guess I'm worried about trends in higher education where we're seeing that students and others somehow feel that they should never have to confront an idea that offends them or disturbs them in any way, because learning ends there.
Yeah, it's a strange time right now, you know.
Yeah, it really is, and I see it in colleagues. They're friends of mine who Jonathan Haidt wrote a book with a colleague of his called "The Coddling of the American Mind," where he was saying, I was just with him in New York a few months ago, in the book, and he was at a public event I was at, saying that he and others, but he in particular, taught at NYU, had changed the content of certain of his lectures because he knew that there would be objection, that students would object and he could be fired. The things he would have talked about 10 or 15 years ago. But students would now object enough in an organized way to, shame him if necessary or whatever, by pointing out this person is talking about something that's racist, or this person is talking about something. And I just think we have to ask ourselves the question, we have to really reevaluate that. When teachers feel they cannot teach, the extreme version of that was last week, I was going to tweet about it, in Pakistan. A liberal arts teacher was beloved, was killed because someone heard that he was criticizing the Quran, okay, and Islam. It turns out he wasn't. But I mean, there's the death penalty for the person. And people beloved him because he was actually talked about ideas and provoked people. The kind of teacher you would have loved in high school, right, is someone who provoked you and got you to come out of your shell. Well, if of course, and the extreme of it is not being able to talk about issues that might offend extremist Islam in Pakistan, but I'm worried about that in the United States. I was just talking to Ian McEwan, who I'd read in his new book, which is coming out this week, called Cockroach, which everyone should get, for Ian and others. It's about Brexit. I'll warn you, but it was one amazing statement that in an open society, all things are allowed except for that which is explicitly forbidden. Whereas in a totalitarian society, all things are forbidden unless they're sanctioned by the state. Very interesting idea. But what I realized when reading that, and asked him the question in the podcast that we're going to be doing, that'll come up soon, is our open society turning towards the second? So in an open society, all things are allowed unless explicitly forbidden, that's fine. But if suddenly we live in a society where all things are talking about anything is explicitly forbidden unless somehow it's universally accepted to be okay, then are we reverting to that closed society in a different way? Not totalitarian because it's imposed by the government, but a closed society which is the opposite of a healthy democracy. Things should be allowed unless explicitly forbidden, and all ideas nothing should be sacred. And if we have this sacred notion of things we're never able to talk about or do, for even ask the question, even to decide that it's horrible, but to ask the question, is it horrible? If just asking the question, is discussing X horrible, gets you fired or gets students protesting, that's a dangerous situation.
Right, and we're in it now.
Well, I don't. Yeah, we are on the we're in it at one level or another, and we're in it in society as well, and it's dangerous. It doesn't mean we can't condemn things, but it means the purpose of free speech is to guarantee speech with which you disagree. Right? That's the whole point. It's guarantee the right of people to say something you hate. That's what we should have in a democracy, and that's what we should enshrine in a Bill of Rights: the right of people who you disagree with to speak. And unfortunately, that's the opposite of what's going on. And if that's the case, you can't have a healthy democracy.
Do you think ASU was fair with you, or did they succumb to the political correctness of the time?
ASU is a university that is run by bureaucrats and is worried about exactly those things, and in fact had to, when the fact that I was an atheist would often produce the president would get angry letters, and the question is, at what point do you try and act rationally, and at what point do you try and act for marketing purposes? And so I think what's going on in universities around the country, and ASU is no different than anything else, is that you're seeing that universities are, unfortunately, on many subjects, unwilling to defend the rights of people to speak out and to carry on the kind of intellectual activities that a university should be for, and I'm worried about it.
It's not just universities. I mean, we saw Neil deGrasse Tyson had some allegations against him. They put one of his shows on hold for like a year.
Well, the problem is, we can talk about that. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it, but we are living in a society where allegations, because of the internet, of any sort, can impact on people. And what happens is that obviously due process and all the rest goes by the wayside, because if an allegation can impact you, I'll take an example which will undoubtedly infuriate people, but Justin Trudeau in Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, I used to remember when his father was Prime Minister, is in a lot of trouble for having dressed up in a costume party about Aladdin with blackface, okay? And one can debate in many ways whether that's a reasonable thing to do. But to dress up in a costume party 25 years ago in a costume party, where if he dressed up as a Frankenstein, no one would have made a difference. He was dressing up as someone else. And some people are immediately offended because it was blackface, and there are issues you can talk about. Reasonable people can have a discussion. But I find it worrisome that the question of whether he might be reelected as Prime Minister will come back to that costume party, and not to the actions that he's done as Prime Minister or the things he's espoused. Of course, you look at people's character and everything else, but when we live in a world where that kind of thing can cancel someone, as in this cancel culture, it's worrisome, right? Because it means that people are going to be afraid if they think that something they believe in or talk about is going to potentially destroy their life. The extreme of it was back in the Soviet Union, right? When you knew there are things you could not talk about. People behind the walls talked about it, but you knew there was things you could not publicly say. We look back on that time as an awful period. But what we're doing now is censoring the kind of public conversations and ability to act and behave as a rational, sympathetic human being by removing people or being able to remove people that you disagree with in one way or another, that you like for one reason or don't like, and for whatever actions or thoughts or words they've done, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous. It's not, but I don't think that's what's interesting to me, is that's why I don't make predictions about the future. That when I look at science fiction, it always misses the important stuff. I mean, George Orwell's 1984 is a profoundly important book and a terrifying book. But the propaganda, the way the government did it there, they didn't need it. You don't need to do that, okay? What we need now, all you need to do is manipulate. Sure, they talked about manipulating information and war is peace, but in a very crude way. Now you can manipulate the public to do what you want in much more sophisticated ways, and still get kind of mob rule by doing that. And we view the world of 1984 with war as peace as an awful world. And what's surprising is it's not necessarily the government directly doing this, but we're in a world where we're perilously close in certain ways to imitating that awful world, because we are allowing because of the unexpected power of the internet that hasn't yet been able to be dealt with, the ability for falsifications to have an impact, the ability for accusations, which in the old days would just be that, to be now promoted by clickbait desiring journalists or government to promote. Look what's happening in the United States right now. There may be a crisis, a constitutional crisis, because Donald Trump apparently spoke to the head of the Ukraine about trying to investigate Joe Biden and his son, right? That should be illegal, right? To try and get another government to investigate your political opponent, right? In a democracy, that should be enough to can you, okay? What I read in the right-wing press, and say Fox News, is they suddenly come up and say, oh, this is the end of Joe Biden, that scandal that he needed to be investigated in Ukraine. And so you can pervert things so efficiently by just repeating these lies over and over again that you got to worry. You got to worry.
Yeah.